What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikiPikaPapa, and guess what, everybody? No graphs, no charts, no data dives today. You get a big old picture of my ugly mug, and we're just going to have a conversation about Pokemon investing as a whole. And this came up because, I'll be honest, I don't watch a lot of YouTube, and there's a couple reasons for that. First and foremost, it's because I don't have the time, right? I share with you guys very transparently. I travel a ton for work. I have to shoot my videos on weekends, so I just don't have a lot of time. I do watch PTCG radio, believe it or not, because the gentleman there talks all about the game side of things, and I've told you I want to learn more about the game. So on my way to the airport, I listen to PTCG radio, and on the way back, I do the same thing, trying to learn more about the game, the mechanics, and all kinds of stuff in that space. But the other reason, besides the time that I don't, is because I think it's very important as a content creator, which I guess now I am, that I keep my thoughts my own. And I want to make sure that it's very hard to listen to a whole bunch of other people's thoughts and opinions and not let that bleed into yours. And I think that I don't want to do that, right? I want to tell you how I feel and I think, and sometimes it's right and sometimes it's wrong and sometimes it's somewhere in between, but I just don't want to do that. And this video idea came from my wife, actually, which is really cool because she said, I went down the YouTube rabbit hole the other day and there were a bunch of people talking about Pokemon investing. They were talking about it's good, it's bad, pros, cons, all this other stuff. And she said, you know, Ryan, you should share your journey with them because I have been investing in cards for 20 years at this point, and I've learned a lot of lessons, a lot of hard lessons, a lot of really good lessons. And obviously I am now very heavily, quote unquote, investing in the Pokemon space. So she said, you should share your story with people. And I said, well, they might not care, but I'm sure they're sick of all the graphs and charts, so I will go ahead and do that. It's also fun. Like, there's going to be a lot of learnings in here, and I can't teach you everything that I've learned over the last 20 years in a 15-minute video, but I can certainly tell you about my personal investing strategy, my personal investing goals, and why Pokemon investing either is or isn't, you know, a good thing for me and my family. Now, one of my favorite quotes, and I've shared this at time to time throughout the course of this channel's life, is this one down here. It says, if you put someone with experience and someone with money in the same room, do you know what happens? Do you know what happens? The person with the money leaves with the experience, and the person with the experience leaves with the money. Now, that is a very powerful quote, and I've thought of that for a long time. I heard that maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago, and that's always really stuck with me. And when I think about the word experience, to me, the experience is like the aggregate of all of the mistakes that we've made throughout our lives or in a particular subject or, you know, whatever that means. But for me, like, that's what experience is. Experience comes from making mistakes, and I promise you, I have made my fair share of mistakes in the card collecting space over the last 20 years, and guess what? Spoiler alert, I'm going to continue to make mistakes moving forward, but my goal is to minimize those mistakes. My goal is to take the lessons learned, apply them to the present so that hopefully I can have some idea of what might happen in the future and to give me the best chance of overall success. So with that being said, I thought I'd start off with talking about this. When we talk about Pokemon investing in the long run, about is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What should we expect? The answer is nobody knows. Like, I don't know. Your favorite Pokemon tubers don't know. Like, none of us know. Nobody out there knows what the future holds. Pokemon is very, very different from, say, the stock market, right? When you buy shares of stock, you are buying an actual piece of a company, a real live company that serves customers, that generates revenue, that will either succeed in the future. If you invest in Microsoft and they have some big AI breakthrough, right? They're going to go up through the roof, right? Or you could invest in a company like, I don't know, Chevron, right? And all of a sudden fossil fuels, you know, just disappear, right? Well, then they're going to have to find other ways and the business might suffer. You could invest in precious metals, right? There could be some amazing technology that comes out and all of a sudden, you know, silver is the key to that technology working. Well, silver prices are going to spike through the roof. Like, when you're talking about Pokemon cards, you are buying cardboard and ink. That is it. There is no utility to it. There's no intrinsic value to it. Like, that is it. You're buying cardboards and ink. And when I think about the future of Pokemon investing, this is the biggest supply and demand play that there possibly is, right? That is what this comes down to. In the future, will the demand for what we have today be higher than the supply? If the supply is lower than the demand, prices go up. If the supply is higher than the demand, prices come down. It is that simple. When you are thinking about investing in Pokemon cards, whether it's cards or sealed product or slabs or whatever, that is what you have to think about. And what you're betting on, really, in my mind, in the simplest of terms, is you are betting on the Pokemon Company International. You are betting on them. You are investing in them. You are saying, hey, listen, I believe that they can continue this amazing bull run, that they can continue to grow on the world's largest franchise, right? Like, Pokemon is the biggest franchise in the world when it comes to, you know, media and all of those things. And so they have a track record that they can grow and build this brand. And when you're buying these Pokemon cards, you're hoping and praying and betting that they can continue to do that over time. Now, listen, one of the things that I always say is this: Time is your best friend. The reason some people who are watching this video right now will not be successful in Pokemon investing, and I don't mean that in a mean way, but it's just a fact. Some of you watching this will not be successful. It's because you won't put the time into it. You will expect certain returns in a certain period of time, or life will happen, right? You could find other priorities. You could find something you love more than Pokemon collecting. You could get really involved in a new job and you don't have the time to do the research. That is not a bad thing. A lot of people will phase out, and then hopefully they'll phase in later in life where they have more money and we can sell them all of these really awesome Sword and Shield products that we've all been warehousing for the last year. But the biggest benefit you have, your best friend in the worlds of any type of investing, I don't care if it's stock market, I don't care if it's precious metals, I don't care if it's art or cars or Pokemon, guess what? Your best friend is time. And I have been doing this for a long, long time. And I have seen people come in with all the money in the world, with all the gusto in the world, and they say, hey, this is for me, this is what I want to do. And 3 to 4 years down the road, they fizzle out. So I'm telling you right now, it is not a bad thing to fizzle out over time, but the reason that most people don't find success in the space is because they don't put the time into it. Now, the next thing I want to talk about right here is a little bit about my story, because my story is what the culmination of my experiences is, and that's where I'm at today. So in 2003, I purchased my first graded card ever. Now, that is when I truly started my journey of investing into the card space, right? I have always been a collector. I've collected cards since I was a little kid. Some of my fondest memories are getting a pack of baseball cards or football cards at the checkout lane with my mom in the grocery store as a little kid. I am very, very emotionally connected to collecting. But in 2003, I purchased my very first graded card. I had no idea what it was. I purchased a Joe Montana 1981 Topps rookie, and I got it in a PSA 7, and it came in the mail, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And then I fell so much in love with it that I decided that I want to continue to grow this collection. I want to continue to focus on this. And I had a very narrow focus. So back then, baseball was the big thing. Baseball was America's pastime, but I had this belief that the football space was going to take over. Football seemed to be gaining a lot of momentum. I was a football player through high school and college, and so I had a lot of connections to that, and I wanted to collect NFL Hall of Fame rookie cards. So these are the absolute best players to ever play the game of football, and this is their rookie card, so the very first card that ever came out with their name on it. And throughout the journey of collecting that set, I learned a ton. I learned everything I could about PSA pop reports. You will see in tons of my videos I represent PSA population numbers. Well, that's because I've been looking at those numbers for as long as they've existed. For 20 years, I've been looking at PSA pop reports, right? The other thing that I've learned is that popularity drives long-term value and growth. And so in the football space, right, you have your quarterbacks, you have your running backs, you have your wide receivers, right? Like those are the people who score. Those are the sexy positions, right? Those are the players that have the most long-term growth. When you think about the other players, right, you got your defensive players, or you have your offensive linemen, your defensive linemen. There's very few kickers and punters in the Hall of Fame, but those that are, like, their cards just don't appreciate much. And the other thing that I've been able to tie into that over time is the PSA population report and the correlation between that and the popularity, right? So you could have a Tom Brady rookie card and that population can be through the roof, but it doesn't matter because he was a quarterback, because everybody wants Tom Brady. So the population is less important because the person on the card is incredibly popular and there's this huge fan base which will soak it up, right? An example of that in the Pokemon space would be like the Moonbreon from Evolving Skies. Like, you know that I'm always updating you on the number of PSA 10s out in the world in that. There's over 11,000 Moonbreon PSA 10s right now, but it doesn't matter because the demand for that card is so incredibly high. That card is so incredibly popular. So whenever I'm talking about population reports, whenever I'm trying to explain Pokemon investing, I hear a lot of people talk about, well, there's too many slabs out there. Well, that's a relative term. Like, what is too many? The market will tell us what too many PSA 10 slabs are. Cards like Charizard, right? Cards like Mew, Mewtwo, you got Gengar, you got Pikachu, right? Like, those can support a much larger PSA 10 population because those are much more popular characters, right? The other thing that I learned was I learned patience and persistence. I'm telling you now, I have waited years to buy individual cards early on in my collecting journey because I couldn't find the card in the grade that I wanted at the price that I wanted, and I always had it on a hit list. I am very patient. I am very persistent. You hear me say this all the time ad nauseum. I say buy what will go up, not what has gone up. That is a big, big lesson that I have learned back in the past. If I miss something, if I miss an opportunity to buy something at a great price, I don't lose sleep over it. I don't freak out. There is going to be another something in the future which will present an equal awesome opportunity, so I'm always about that. I learned how to allocate my collection dollars, which kind of goes with patience and persistence, but I will go through a slide and I'll tell you exactly how I allocated my money back then and how I allocate my money today to make sure that I'm meeting all of my financial goals, not just my ones in the Pokemon collecting and investing space. And the other thing that was really cool, these last two things are kind of like some of my biggest takeaways, was Believe it or not, I don't look at the price of my collection. I've had people ask me, what apps do you use? How do you keep an eye on the prices of all of the cards and boxes and sealed products that you have? Well, I upload them into an app, right? Like I do, like everybody else does, but I never look at it because it's irrelevant to me because I have such a long time horizon. I don't let any of the fluctuations that's going on right now affect me. And because I don't let any of that affect me, I don't get caught up in any of the FOMO. I don't get caught up in any of the pump and dump, right? If something starts to go up and it doesn't make sense to me, I just ignore it because I know that it's eventually going to come back down because the price spikes that we're seeing aren't actually able to be sustained for the long period. So listen, I don't look at the prices of my cards. It's just something that I don't do, and I just have no desire to do that. And then I learned that I'm an equal part collector and investor, right? And by that I mean I consider myself a growth collector. I like to collect things that are going to increase in value over time. I like to collect things that I think in the long run, if I decide to sell, will be worth a whole heck of a lot more money than I buy them right now. But I'm a big collector. I love things. I hate selling things, right? When I first got into Pokemon with my kids, I thought this will be great. I have less of an emotional connection to the Pokemon side than I do to the football side, so I'll be able to, sell things at a little more of a higher rate. But guess what? I don't sell any of my Pokemon stuff because I love it even more than the football card side, right? Like I am just absolutely so much in love with this amazing hobby. So I'm equal parts collector and investor, and really just a long-term growth collector is what I consider myself. Now, the other things that I wanted to talk about, and I mentioned it a minute ago, was how I prioritize my assets. And when I first started doing this in 2003, I was a server in a restaurant, okay? So I come from very humble beginnings, and I've been able to build a great career. So what I'm able to do now is very, very different than what I could do then. But even back then, I was very money conscious, right? And so I knew that I worked 5 shifts a week every single week. But I also took on every additional responsibility that I could. And if they called me to come in for an extra shift, I always say yes. If I was scheduled to do a mid shift and they asked me if I would close, I always said yes. I made a ton of money because people would get done with their shift and they wanted to go home early, and guess what? They didn't want to roll silverware. If you've never worked in a restaurant, you can roll silverware at the end. It's called side work, right? You have to do it before they let you go home. Well, people would pay me $20 to roll their silverware for them. I would stay for an extra hour, hour and a half. I'd roll 4 people's extra silverware for them. I'd make an extra $80 at the end of the shift. Like I was always trying to make additional money. And the reason I did that was because I had a goal. I had something set in stone. Every shift I put $100 that I made in tips, and I would put that into my bank account, right? That was money that I couldn't touch. But anything above and beyond that $100, I used that for fun stuff, right? I used it in investing. I used it to support my hobby of collecting football cards. So like I always had this, my $100 that I had could not touch even if I wanted to. The $100 went into the bank. That was to pay my bills. That was to support just my normal lifestyle. But anything above and beyond is what I used for investing and in the hobby space. And that taught me very, very early on that that's what I should do. Now, today I'm much older. I have a much better job, right? I have different levels of responsibility than I did back in 2003. So I'm telling you right now, like I want you to understand, I prioritize so many things before I prioritize my Pokemon investing, and I encourage all of you to come up with your own investment plan. I will say this loud, I will say this proud, I will say this right now. If you are over prioritizing Pokemon investing, if this is your main vehicle to get you through to retirement, to make sure that you have a great life when you finally stop working, I think you're out of your freaking gourd, right? Like there's too many unknowns in the world of Pokemon collecting and investing, and these are the things that I prioritize before I finally get to my Pokemon collecting and investing dollars. I prioritize my Roth IRA. Our IRA, that is absolutely my favorite investment vehicle, like tax-free growth. You can't beat it. I have a 401k with a company match. I prioritize that. After that, I have a taxable account, right? I want to make sure that I have some money in a taxable account too. I have a vending business I've talked to you all about. We are growing our vending business. We are investing in ourselves. We are growing our future. Like it is growing like hotcakes, but we have to continually invest into that, right? We don't pull any money out of it, but the money that those machines generate, we use it to buy more machines. We're snowballing it. Every new machine is another snowflake on this snowball that we hope turns into an avalanche of a very big business further down the road, so we're investing in that. I have a 529 savings account for each of my children, right? Higher education is very important to me, and I want to make sure that when and if they decide to go to college, because you don't always have to go to college and graduate, I highly encourage you to, but I never graduated college. It was for a bunch of different reasons. It just wasn't for me. But when and if my children decide to go, I want to make sure that they can go to the college of their choice, so I'm always funding that. And then I'm investing in Pokemon collecting and investing. I'm spending money on that, and that is a ton of fun. And that fills all kinds of different levels of excitement and joy that I don't get out of those other things. So what I'm telling everybody is this: you have to make sure that you prioritize where you're spending your money. You have to do it smartly. You have to do it intelligently, because the decisions that you make today, whether you realize it or not, where you spend your money today, will have some effect further down the road. It's not going to make or break you if you're younger in your life. Like, I wish I'd started investing in the stock market earlier than I did, but I tell you what, I'm going to talk about this in a minute. My investing in alternative assets, my investing in sports cards in the graded space it's helped my net worth grow substantially over the last 20 years, and I've been able to get a lot of fun out of it while I've been doing it. Now, the next one I want to talk about is this, and this is the super cool thing, and I tell my wife we are so incredibly fortunate because I have a hobby and a passion in appreciating assets. And I'm telling you right now, that is a blessing beyond compare. There is nothing wrong with any of these other things, but a lot of people I know in my circle, like I am in the PC space, I will tell you that, and a lot of people I work with are very passionate about PCs and gaming. They'll go out and they'll buy that 4090 Founders Edition, and there's nothing wrong with that. They get a ton of love from it, but guess what? In 3 years, that is worth a fraction of what it was worth when you bought it. Same thing, you buy games, right? And they give you a lot of joy, but guess what? There's usually a monthly subscription with some of them, and that's cost money, right? And then, are you a foodie? I'm a big foodie. I don't spend a lot of money on food, but I have friends who absolutely love dropping a couple $100s per dinner, who buy $20, $30 drinks everywhere they go. Guess what? You consume it and then it's gone. You have nothing to show for it. How about cars? You know, a lot of people love their cars. A lot of my friends love their cars, but those aren't really appreciating assets. Cars can be appreciating assets, but probably not the ones that you and me and a lot of people out there can afford. Like, unless you're sitting here buying vintage Porsches, or you're buying some kind of rare car like a serial numbered Hellcat or something like that. Cars typically don't appreciate. Most of the time they depreciate as soon as you drive them off the lot. I'm also a boat owner. I'll tell you like this, I love boats, I love fishing, but talk about a money sink, right? Like, they provide us with a lot of joy, but guess what? There's nothing that is appreciative when it comes to boating and fishing. It is just a money pit. So the fact that over the last 20 years, I have had a hobby, I have had something that has brought me so much joy and has been appreciating in price over time, I think is absolutely fantastic. It is incredibly cool. And I think it's really helped level up our overall net worth over the last 20 years. And the other thing that I want to call out is this, I have a hobby and passion that I can share with my family. How amazing is that? Like, I get to go to conventions with my kids. Back in the day, my kids wanted to be on the PikiPikaPapa channel. We shot a ton of content. We would open packs. We would do PSA blind reveals. You know, the YouTube algorithm didn't love it too much, and they didn't care if they did it or not, so we kind of stopped doing that. But I had a ton of fun with that, and we open all kinds of Pokemon stuff. So not only do I have a hobby that has a tendency to appreciate and value over time, but I have one that I can share with my family that is a blessing beyond compare, and I just think it adds to the overall awesomeness of Pokemon collecting and investing. So the next thing here is, these are questions I ask myself every single time before I make a true investment. I've shared this before. You know, a lot of times I will spend money on some personal collection stuff, and I don't care if it goes up in price. If it's an awesome card and I like it, I'm going to buy it anyways. But when I am actually going to make a quote-unquote investment in the Pokemon space, here's what I ask myself. Am I lacking a realistic expectation? I think expectations are at an all-time high in the Pokemon collecting and investing space. And I'm going to tell you right now, I think that they are unrealistic. I think that they're way too high. So I try and bring myself back down. When I am buying something with the hopes of holding on to it for 5, 10, 15 years, what are my realistic expectations for that? I know that the stock market on average grows about 8% every single year. So if I could eke out maybe a 10% year-over-year gain, guess what? I'm beating the stock market. I get a lot of joy out of it, and I think that is a very, very valuable and powerful place to be if I'm asking that question. The next thing is a clear time horizon, right? Like, I want to make sure, I don't want to be flipping cards every 6 months. I don't want to be selling cards in a year or 2 years, right? I want to make sure that whatever I'm buying, I feel very good that I have a long 3, 5, 10 year, forget about 3, 5, 10, 15 year time horizon or beyond. Maybe it's something that I want to hold in the collection forever. Who knows? I also want to make sure that, am I exhibiting a lack of patience? Okay. Am I FOMOing? Am I, as much as I try and keep myself aware of it, am I getting caught up in some hype? Am I buying something now that I probably could wait a little bit longer and get a better price on in the future? So am I exhibiting a lack of patience? I always ask myself that. And then a lack of investment clarity and focus. There are so many awesome things going on right here, but for me, it's very important to keep a narrow focus. I talked about how in my early days, I had a very, very narrow focus in my sports card collecting space. Well, I do the same thing here. I get questions all the time about One Piece and Lorcana and Japanese Pokemon cards, but listen, I don't really do that. I just don't get involved in that because it takes away from my energy and my focus and me trying to gain experience in the English Pokemon card space. Yes, I bought Japanese 151 booster boxes because I think that that's like a no-brainer, but outside of that, I really don't venture much into it. I have a couple Lorcana, the first chapter booster boxes, because I'm a big Disney fan. I live in Florida, right? We're going to Disney on Sunday, right? So we're a big Disney fan, so I have a couple of them, but I don't spend any time learning about them. Those were just blind buys that I thought were no-brainers, so I have them in the collection and I'm happy to have them, but I try not to kind of divest. I don't try to divert outside of my core competence because to me, it just takes away from it and it adds additional risk. And then I talked about this earlier, lack of free thinking. This kind of comes around to the patience thing. And is this my idea? Is this something that I believe in? Or is this something where I've let some outside voices or opinions kind of creep into the PikiPikaPapa head and say, hey, you should really buy this, or you should really believe in this? Like, I believe in myself above all others, and you should too. You should believe in yourself more than me, more than any other Pokemon YouTuber out there. You have a big, beautiful Pokemon brain. You should use that when you're making decisions. So make sure that the thoughts and the decisions that you're making are of your own. And then, does it lack joy? I talked about one of the things I love about this hobby so much is it brings me joy. I have appreciating assets that bring me joy that I can share with my family. Like, am I buying something simply to check a box? That's not exciting for me. I don't want to spend my dollars on that. I want something that will fit into that growth collecting mentality. So does it lack joy? And then, as always, I say this, I talk about protecting the downside. Is this a safe or is this a responsible buy? Do I have the money to spend on it right now, or is it going to stretch me? Do I think that I'm buying at an approachable price point? You're never going to know the bottom. You're rarely going to hit the bottom, except with those Pokemon Center Elite Trainer boxes that I love so much, right? Because we know that they basically come out at MSRP and they never go below that. But I'm going down a different tangent. Am I making a safe play? Am I making a responsible play? Those are always the things that I ask myself. So once I get through all of those, this is why Pokemon investing is right for me. And again, as I said, you have to make the decision is right for you. Just because this is my journey, just because I've had success in the card collecting space, that doesn't mean that Pokemon collecting and investing is going to be a great thing into the future. We are investing in the Pokemon Company International. We're investing in their ability to continue to grow. And guess what? Right now, Scarlet and Violet, I'm not overly thrilled with Twilight Masquerade, right? Like, who knows what Scarlet and Violet is going to look like? But even if Scarlet and Violet doesn't end up being the best era, there will be another Sword and Shield era. So that is where I'm going to go ahead and, exhibit some patience and make sure that I'm not FOMOing and make sure that I'm waiting for the right time to buy in. But listen, here's why Pokemon investing is right for me. It is part of my core and explore philosophy. I've shared that with you early on. I've shared it in other videos. Like, I spend a lot of my money in my core investing space, but I also like to explore into alternative assets, and Pokemon fits that gap, right? Like, I'll tell you right now, my Pokemon collection can go to zero. All of these awesome cards behind me could go to $0, and I would be very, very upset. As a matter of fact, I would be devastated. I would absolutely cry. It would break my heart, but it won't fundamentally change the trajectory of my investment future. It's not going to affect my family adversely. Like, I make sure that I take care of all of that stuff on the front end before I even get involved into this. So that's a big reason why Pokemon investing and collecting is right for me. The other thing is, it's my passion. It's my hobby. Like, I hope that comes through in these videos, how much I love this. This video has been a little more subdued because we're talking about some really high level serious stuff, but I get so much joy out of this. As I said, it's an appreciating asset that brings me entertainment and fun and joy, and it just doesn't get any better than that. So yeah, instead of going out and, I could be a stargazer, right, and spend $10,000 on a telescope to stare at stars in the backyard, but I don't do that. Like, I collect and invest in Pokemon cards. It brings me joy, and I have a ton of fun with this. I can share it with my family. I can do this with my kids. There's a lot of things that are on those lists that you can't share with your family and friends, but I can do this. My mom doesn't know a darn thing about Pokemon, but she loves hearing about it. She buys me Pokemon cards for my birthday, even though I'm 40 years old. Like, how awesome is that? How cool is it to have a hobby that you can share with your family like that? The other thing is, it does have a strong track record of performance. Now listen, previous results have nothing to do with future returns. You just can't do a one-for-one. All of us who are thinking that maybe some of those early era booster boxes are an indication that these, Evolving Skies and Team Up booster boxes are going to get to be $250,000 someday, I just don't think it's going to happen. But what I will say is this: there's a very strong track record of performance and results, especially in the sealed space. And I feel safe with that. I feel safe in the fact that the Pokemon Company International has been able to navigate good times and bad, global pandemics, heights of the hobby, lows of the hobby. They're still around. They are so diversified across the entire world. Like, I feel very, very safe in the fact that the Pokemon Company will still continue to exist 20 years down the road. And that is why I feel good there. But even with all of those positives, I also understand the risk. As I said at the very top of this, guess what? I understand there is a risk that at the end of the day, all I am buying is cardboard and ink. It could absolutely go to zero someday. The hobby could collapse. People could not find value in it anymore. Who knows what could happen in the world over the next 20 years, right? Like, maybe alternative assets, maybe card collecting as a whole just takes a back seat because we have some macro level, some crazy event that happens. I don't know, but I understand the risks. I stare them in the face every single day. I ask those questions that we just went through a minute ago, and I come up with, is this a safe and is this a reasonable investment for me and my family right now? So hey, listen, I can't answer the the question if Pokemon investing is right for you. I can't answer the question, is Pokemon investing going to bring you tons of riches in the future? Only you can answer those questions, but I hope that by me sharing my story, that I hope by me sharing with you kind of how I approach Pokemon investing, at least it lets you know the way I approach things. Again, you should come up with your own thoughts. Don't cookie cutter me, but it's always good to get some input from somebody who has as much experience in collecting as I do. So listen, if you made it to the end, if you enjoyed this content, I know it wasn't as hyped as it normally is, but hit that subscribe button. If you have questions, comments, drop them down below. And as always, if you like what you see, give us a big old thumbs up. I appreciate you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.